38 tournaments down, one to go. It all began in January in Maui. It ends this week in the ATL. The final 30 players have qualified for the Tour Championship as we determine who will be the PGA Tour's FedEx Cup champion. And we check in with the Golfbet Insider Rob Bolton from PGATour.com, trying to withstand the withering heat of Arizona, where we have broken a record, huh? What's happening, big fella?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, 90. This will be the 94th consecutive day of 100 degrees or higher. It was 108 yesterday. It's gonna be 100 and something today, and we're gonna keep going. I think for the next 2 weeks it's at least 100. So, shattering the old record, which was 31 years ago. Always tipping my visor to all of the outdoor workers I see out here. I know they're used to it. So thankful to have an indoor profession, Swanee. And not, I mean, even in golf, not walking the fairways like they have been for the playoffs in the heat and humidity. Unsung heroes for local workers here, and these people doing the yeoman's work out there, getting the coverage to you and all of us as fans and gamers and investors to make sure that we're as in tune with what's happening. It's something else. I cannot wait for it to break, though, man. It's crazy. This is our winter. It's cabin fever in a major way because of the heat. You just never go outside. You don't want to go outside. You cancel plans. It's really something. It's a little bit more than we're used to out here, and I've been out here 11 years.
I'm glad you got that off your chest. I feel like that was therapeutic for you.
Thank you.
Hey, tip of the cap to you, by the way, for all of your yeoman's work all season long, of course, and for doing this segment every week, and for going deep, 30 deep, full power rankings this week, short field. So there's going to be some short odds, but bettors are certainly aware of that and acknowledge that. I'll start right at the top with Xander Schauffele. I think kind of out of the player of the year conversation, at least in my estimation, but he comes into the week at 8 under. He's as close to Scheffler in the staggered scoring format as anyone, starting the week 2 back at East Lake, and relatively short odds at plus 450 for Xander, who sits atop the power rankings here.
He's been the guy at East Lake. The tricky thing this week is that East Lake is not what we know it to be and not what they know it to be. And in retrospect, it'll be one of those weeks where we'll know who are the really good golfers. And if it happens to correlate with previous success on the course, it may be more of a coincidence. It's a different course because of the restoration by Andrew Green. Grasses, I mean, everything seems to be new, and the guys are talking about it, and they don't recognize certain things. And yet the course record still applies, which is always one of those quirks for me in professional golf. Like, it's not the same thing. It should be a new course record. But be that as it may, that's secondary to what our objective this week. I love Xander Schauffele just the fact that in a sense, if we're thinking about starting our expectations at the bottom, just ignoring the format for a second and his position in second place in the opening leaderboard, his floor is higher than everyone else right now. And Scottie Scheffler, of course, is a close second to that, and that's why they're slotted that way. So the scoring obviously benefits Scottie, but if there's a bogey birdie swap at the top, suddenly they're even. That's all it takes. I'm not reading too much into that spread. 72 holes is a long way to go. We've seen a lot of guys over the years climb from outside the top 10 into the top 10, typically 5 or 6 every year. Last year it was 6. Expect the same this year. Sungjae M and Schauffele twice. I mean, these guys have climbed from outside the top 10 to finish in second place. Schauffele's done that twice. He's finished as the low aggregate twice in this tournament and hadn't won it. That was once before the starting strokes. Otherwise, he would have won it in the current format. So for all that he's accomplished, he hasn't accomplished this yet. And the form is there. Didn't have to play last week. He acknowledged that he thought about not playing and finished tied for 5th. All of the angles are just incredibly strong for the guy. And he was my pre-playoffs pick to win the FedEx Cup. So I'm just sticking with it. And lo and behold, he's as long as plus 225 to win it. Scheffler plus 120 as we're talking. It's like sort of stupid odds, but that's what you get in this tournament. They're just happy they have a board and a market for if you want to play.
Which is what leads me to Sam Burns at number 3. This is the guy for me, Rob. What a start to the playoffs. 5th and 2nd for Sam, who starts the week at 4 under, 6 shots back. Certainly a guy with the firepower to gobble up that ground pretty quickly. And the value on Burns, is frankly a lot better than I thought it would be. He's in the neighborhood of 20-1. That's pretty tasty.
And as I'm saying, I'm seeing 40-1 here at BetMGM. That's quite a dispersion as I'm looking at the outrights talking here on a Wednesday, which is crazy. You got to run to the window for that. You know, in a vacuum and in my space and under my fingers, I'd be writing a lot more about the nappy factor as it concerns Sam Burns. But he's Sam Burns, so how he's performing is kind of what we've expected from him. Yet he's still a human being, and the nappy factor still applies to him, just at an elevated level. We saw it impact him in advance of having Bear a few months ago. Probably name of the year right there, I think, for all newborns on the PGA Tour. I don't care what anybody says. That's I wasn't necessarily a big fan of it at first, and then it's really grown on me. And obviously Sam has been performing like a new father of a son. That's how this thing works. And yeah, man, he's really exciting right now. And thank you for supporting him at number 3. There's been a little bit of dissent for slotting him that high, but man, he's deserved it. Now, there's a lot of it's a little bit like a lot of these guys who show up, and Wyndham Clark is a perfect example, although he's trending too lately. A lot of hit or miss in that game, but Sam's playing as he needs to play. The only guy who's matched him who hasn't won in the playoffs right now in the last 2 weeks is Xander Schauffele with a 2 and a 5 up on the board. So bullish on him. Yeah, the problem with the odds at 40-1, 20-1, whatever you're going to find, is that, as you said, he starts 6 back. We saw Colin Morikawa open with a 61 last year, didn't win. We saw Keegan Bradley open with a 63 last year, didn't win. So even a hot round, no matter who it is, well, unless it's maybe Scotty or Xander, it's going to take him. It's a 72-hole tournament. So hang in there. It's probably going to be one of those weeks where opening odds are going to be much more. Well, it will be one of those weeks, where opening odds will be much more attractive for the guys who are at 4 under or in that vicinity than they will be, say, after 18 holes. So that's the live betting will not be as maybe lucrative as it would be in other weeks.
Only one player has won the FedEx Cup 3 times. That's Rory McIlroy. It is noteworthy that twice he has come from pretty far back, 4 under and 5 under. He's gone on to win the Cup on both of those occasions. He starts the week 4 under here this week, Rob. I mean, that for me, that's right in Rory's wheelhouse. I think it's a far more favorable position to see him stalking than actually in the pole position. And I think the markets agree, because despite being 6 back, he's in the neighborhood of 10 or 11-1 here this week.
So I just heard Keegan Bradley drop on the wall behind me. That's the only negative thing that's happened to Keegan Bradley this year. And I apologize to Keegan and his family. Xander has Scotty right where he wants him. Well, I think Rory has the field right where he wants it. As you said, this is kind of what he expects. He loves that additional layer. Look, Rory can be a front runner, but man, we see so much more grit and fun out of him playing at golf when he's not. And so he's 7th in the power rankings. It's more of a it's not an indictment. It's more of a reflection of where he opens, and maybe some pause in his recent form. Not as far as an indictment. He'd be much further down if that was the case. But I'm acknowledging the other guys who deserve to be 1 through 6. That's all it is. He's a high 7 if you wanted to think of it that way. He's got to be in my fantasy lineup, and he is. The outright odds are going to be favorable. I mean, right now, again, 20-1. You're not going to find him at 20-1 most weeks, but especially in a week when he starts, T5, or something like that, right? T5. He hasn't presented much reason to believe that he can't reconnect immediately. I dug what he said last week about can't wait to get to see the restoration of East Lake. So he was eager to get there in the first place. All good things from Rory.
Let's talk about your man, Keegan Bradley. The last player to sneak into the field, the BMW last week at 50th. He now finds himself 4th. I think he's going to have a very busy fall. I think he's going to be on that President's Cup team as a competitor. He's already a vice captain. Who knows if he's going to be a playing captain at Bethpage in the Ryder Cup. That's a different conversation about a year from now. But Keegan is in that neighborhood at 6 under. I don't know if I'd go much deeper than that down the board to look for guys who could win, but Bradley's certainly capable of doing that. And he's in position to cash for some investors here this week, around 40-1, maybe even better than that, Rob.
We go from not Keegan to your reference of Keegan, of all the other 27 golfers in the field we haven't covered yet. If your license plate doesn't say Mr. Segway or something along those lines, I'll be disappointed, pal. And it still surprises me. I shouldn't be surprised, but that was nice. So Keegan is trying to become the 9th in playoffs history to win consecutive playoffs or consecutive tournaments in the same playoffs. We kind of covered this a little bit last week. He'd be the 13th in history to win multiple tournaments in the same playoffs. This is the 18th edition. It's not like this has been going on for 100 years, and like that's still like a high percentage of it. It's a ridiculous stat, and it's an opportunity for these guys to put their head down and go to work. The thing is, he's number 9 in the power rankings because he's not the type of guy that does that. He has prevailed, similarly like this, but it's 6 under, and the confidence I have in him winning in the second week is not as high as it would be for others. The board reflects that at 33-1, despite his opening position. So if you're of that ilk, where you want to dive into that history, which is on your side, have at it. That's a good reason. Like, you rarely get that type of reason, if at all. So dive into that. The course will set up similarly in terms of unfamiliarity as Castle Pines did last week, and that favors his game. He lost 1.6 strokes to the field on the greens with his putter and still won by 1 for the week across 72 holes. This week, it should matter more, but it's the same sort of setup, even though guys have been there before. It's a really curious and intriguing angle for him this week. It's more of just a conservative in me and looking at some of these other guys who have done it here before. This is why it's a quirky, fascinating experience. We're going to see some of that coincidence because it is a new course. But then again, sightlines are going to be similar in other places, and guys will find their groove, and they'll feel the heat and humidity of Atlanta. There's a familiarity there. So if anything, I'm just sort of swerving around the first-timers who, there's 9 of them in the field, that they are benefited because the course is new, but they haven't never played in a tour championship, and I'm not dismissing the impact of that as well.
It's a lot of first-timers, basically a third of the field. So it's been a tumultuous start to the playoffs for Hideki, hasn't it? A victory in Memphis, followed by a WD with a back issue after the opening round last week in Denver. Matsuyama's 12th in the power rankings, starts the week at 7 under. He's only 3 back to start, assuming he feels healthy, and he's maybe not 100%, but there's a lot on the line here this week. Maybe bettors are getting better value because of the back issue. What's Matsuyama on the board as we speak here?
You go from the winner of the BMW Championship to the winner of the FedEx St. Jude Championship. I don't know if we've had a more interesting pair of winners in the first 2 events in playoffs history until this year. And both, again, relatively have question marks upon arrival at the Tour Championship, which is absurd because we're always careful. We're always, looking around for, the demons around the corner when it comes to where we're going to put our units. With Hideki, as we're speaking, he's 3rd shortest at 11-1, and that's reflective of his opening position, obviously. In a vacuum, he's outside number 12? Number 12 in the power rankings, and that's just a reflection of how healthy is he. I want to believe, just as I was last week, and I invested in fantasy, that he's fine. The back issue, we've known about that forever. If you haven't followed the PGA Tour or golf for a long time, you're probably already familiar with his injury woes over time, and hey, that's the way it is. That's why it's called gambling. You just never know. So this week, the fact that he didn't lose any ground in the FedEx Cup rankings, he opens 3rd on the leaderboard and three back of Scotty. But yeah, it's again the conservative of me. I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want to deal with that again. However, he has to be in fantasy lineups because of his opening position. I don't like him at 11-1 to win. If anything, maybe a top 10, but you're not going to get any value there. If you wanted to go into like a top Asian market, that type of thing, have at it. But you're not going to get any value there because there's only like three or four guys in that market. So it's maybe just a good week to abstain. Or if you're if you're a risky investor and you like all of those things that make him a contrarian, double down on the units in the outright and have fun with it.
Real quick thought before we close on Adam Scott. If you're looking for a dark horse, a long shot here this week, somebody who's 7 back as Scott is, you could do a lot worse than the 44-year-old Aussie who just finished second last week in Denver, huh?
Got him 15 in the power rankings. If you're thinking of this as just a predicted finish of how the leaderboard will play out at the end, He's inside the top half. I say that sort of with a tongue-in-cheek because he's really thankful that his major streak didn't come to an end this year. He was on the precipice of that, and it's funny. I don't think that that's big of a deal in terms of a streak. He just wants to play in the majors, and he just happens to play in a lot of them in a row because he's that good. But now, 44 years of age, he's going to be in all of them next year, so he doesn't worry about that anymore. He's been able to reach the Tour Championship. He was my guy entering the playoffs from the furthest outside to get in. Now, obviously, Keegan won and came from 50th last week, but he opened higher than Adam did. Yeah, I think he's just happy to be there in a sense, not to take anything away from him. He's too far away to win with too many guys to cover, even over 72 holes. I think he's really expended his energy, and this is a respect to everybody in the field. He's expended his energy, he's expended his focus to get to where he is, and everything at this point will be icing.
13 straight trips to Atlanta for Adam Scott. At Rob Bolton Golf is where you follow the Golfbet Insider on X. Well-deserved down week for you, big fella. FedEx Cup Fall is on the horizon. We will reconvene at some point. I look forward to it. Thanks so much.
All right, buddy.